What's up everyone, Zach Seif here, and today we're going to be going over how I prepare for a musical theater gig. So for those of you that have been around the channel for a while, you know that every now and then when Crash the Party or Evolution X is on a break, I like to take some musical theater work to kind of supplement the income, and also because I genuinely enjoy musical theater. I've been doing theater shows for the better part of the past decade or so, between high school, college, community theater, off-Broadway, etc. It's a good way to really own your skills as a musician. It's some of the most intense and difficult music out there. It requires a very high level of being able to read and analyze sheet music, and it also helps you explore some new sounds with your gear, so that's why I love to do them. So the reason I'm making this video is because I'm subbing for my friend for a production of the show Aida. So I figured I'd go over 5 tips to help you prepare for your next musical theater gig. So let's get started. So the very first thing that I do when asked to do a musical theater gig is I get a copy of the score and I take a look at it. The score is basically a physical or digital copy of the sheet music that you'll be playing. Now, if you can't read sheet music, then musical theater is just not the gig for you. All of the music is written and notated, and it's very specific. It's what we call the ink. You have to play the ink. Whatever is written is what you're supposed to play. Because you're part of an orchestra, it's very important that the part that's written for you is what you play, so that the full score can be actualized and heard by not only the rest of the band, but also the cast on stage that might be listening for a very specific melody or lick or riff from your instrument that you need to play exactly as written on cue. So if we take a look at the score for Aida over here, you can see that I have some cues from other instruments, which kind of helps me cue in what's going on, and it kind of helps me figure out where we are in the music. And then I'll have little notes just to kind of help me figure out what position to play melodies and stuff in. So for example, I have here 3rd string, 7th fret, which means that's where I'm going to play this specific D note, and it allows me to play this entire melody all in one position. And then we have a lot of rests, and of course having different time signatures and key signature changes and all these multiple rest measures, it's nice to have other cues. So over here I have the oboe melody and the horn melody so that I can follow along when I'm not playing. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of quickly look through the book. As you can see, I have stuff written all over it, again, just to make sure that when I go to sub for my friend, everything is written. I don't have to second guess myself or think too much about it. And I'll look for specific sections that might look difficult. For example, the lead soli in East Indian dance is pretty tricky, I would say, in comparison to the rest of the book. We have all these different melodies and rhythmic changes. We have these little trills and pull-offs, hammer-ons, and I'll isolate this and just practice it nice and slow at a slower tempo with a metronome, and then try to bring it up to speed to match the rest of the band. Another example here is I literally tabbed out the fight solo during the fight song, where as it was written, I could have spent, half an hour sitting there just practicing it and doing that, but because I'm only filling in for one show and there's so much going on here, time signature wise and rhythm change, it was just easier for me to tab it out and insert it into the book so that I know that when I show up, I can play it perfectly without second guessing anything. The next thing that I do, which is one of the most important steps, is to dial in your tone to match the vibe and style of the show. When it comes to musical theater, you want to get as close to what the show is supposed to sound like as possible. And the way that you do this is you can go on either YouTube or Spotify, and you can usually find cast recordings of the show. So if I go to Spotify and I type in Aida, the soundtrack comes up. It's the original Broadway cast recording, and this is usually what you should be basing your sound off of. This is what the musical director or the composer was usually going for, and it helps to give you kind of a sense as to how the rest of the orchestra is going to sound and what the arrangements are supposed to be like. So what I'll do is I'll listen to a handful of tracks just to figure out if I'm supposed to use single coil or humbucker, and see what kind of gain staging I need. And then what I'll do is I'll come on over to my Fractal and I'll create a sound that I think closest represents what I think they're going for in the show. So in the case of Aida, I'm just using Dumble amps across the board. Now, obviously, I don't have 6 figures to drop on a real one, so we're going to use the Fractal emulation. I found that the ODS 100, with everything straight in the middle, with the bright switch turned on, gives me the perfect clean tone for this because it doesn't break up, but it still has some character and it doesn't sound anemic. And then cab-wise, I like the sound of these Rectifier 412s. This is what I tour with, and this is what I use in the studio every day, so I'm familiar with how it sounds, and it helps give the Dumble amp a nice, full, warm, round sound. So just to kind of show you what this sounds like, let me find a clean passage here. So this is from the reprise of Elaborate Lives, where we need echo, chorus, and a clean channel. And this is what it sounds like when I play it. So it's a nice clean tone that doesn't break up or distort. I have just a little bit of echo, just enough so that you can hear the effect is there, but not so much that it overpowers the regular sound, and a little bit of chorus just to add that lushness. And again, listening back to the cast recording and other recordings on YouTube, this is the vibe that most guitar players are going for. Likewise, when it comes to different levels of gain, if I go back to the Fight song from before, I have a very specific low gain sound, which is the Dumble ODS 100 Robin Ford mod, right? So it's a low gain, very classic rock sounding, somewhere in like that AC/DC 70s kind of gain, and it works great. So for the beginning of this song, I have a lower gain for the melody, because again, I don't want to overpower, make it sound too metal. So on and so forth. And then when I go to the next page, which is where I have that solo, I have a little bit of more gain, right? So low gain, high gain. And all I'm doing is throwing an overdrive in front of it. It's the Klon, and I chose that because it doesn't really color the tone too much. It just adds a little bit more gain and a little bit more brightness, so that when I have my lead line, it just stands out a little bit more. So on and so forth. The most important part of your signal chain when it comes to musical theater is a volume pedal. You always want to have control over your sound, because you never know when a mic is going to go out on stage, or if the actor or actress is going to be away from maybe a hanging mic or a floor mic during the middle of a scene, and you have to be able to come down at the director's cue to just kind of compensate, especially if there's a moment where there's a lot of dialogue happening but also very busy music underneath it. You want to be able to come down immediately, and you don't want to use the volume knob on your guitar because you're going to lose distortion. And if you take away too much of the harmonic content and sustain and gain going into the front end of an amp, you're going to get lost in the mix. So volume pedal, constantly riding it the entire gig, because you never know when you're going to have to suddenly become louder or when you're going to have to come down in volume at just a moment's notice. So make sure that you always have a volume pedal in your chain. If you're enjoying the video so far, I would love if you took 2 seconds to just hit that subscribe button down below. It helps me out a ton as a content creator. Let's continue on with the video. The next thing up on the list is making my rig as compact as possible. If you've never been in a musical theater pit, it is the smallest possible place to fit the most amount of people and stuff in a production outside of major sets. Usually either in front of or under the stage, and it's dark, there's lots of walls, and it's a lot there's just a lot going on. There's a lot of musicians, there's a lot of instruments, there's a lot of sound going on. So the smaller your rig, the better your chances are of being able to fit everything comfortably and still have enough room to sit without being huddled like this the whole time. So my rig for AIDA is my Fractal FM3 because it's the smallest unit that I have that can do everything that I need it to. This preset that I made on the Axe FX3 fits perfectly on the FM3 with plenty of processing power to spare, so I literally just clicked and dragged it from one unit to the other, and it's on there, loaded, ready to go. On top of that, I have the volume pedal that I mentioned. It's a Dunlop Volume X. It's the size of my foot, so I can rest my foot on there because, like I said, I'm going to be riding it throughout the show. And when it comes to speakers or monitoring and cabinets and stuff like that, I use the Bose S1 Pro. It is a small 15-pound battery-powered speaker that's maybe a foot and a half tall, and it sounds fantastic. It's loud enough that at half volume, I'm usually told to turn down. And this is a small little battery powered Bose speaker, but it's great because I can either put it to the side of me, I can put it right in front of my music stand and angle it up, or I could even fit it under my chair. It's that small, that powerful, and that loud. It's got 2 channels, so I could even run another acoustic guitar into it and bypass all of the processing if I wanted to. And it's the best investment I've made. So I highly recommend the Bose S1 Pro for these pit orchestra gigs where you need just a small little amp to monitor yourself. Best part is that it all fits inside this Pelican case. So all I have to do is show up with my mono dual bag, which will fit 2 Musicman Majesties, I'll explain why in a second, and then the Pelican case, and that gives me a free hand to open doors and load all my gear into the pit. So why am I using a high gain modern guitar like the Musicman Majesty for a musical that is more representative of like 70s and 80s rock? Well, the reason is twofold. One, I need both electric and acoustic guitar sounds for this gig, and because the Majesty has the piezo, I can easily switch between acoustic and electric by just flicking my switch right there and then adjusting my preset on the Fractal. So that's less physical, taking my guitar off, putting it down, picking up the other guitar, getting it ready, plugging it in, making sure it's in tune, making sure I'm on the right preset. It just eliminates all of that because there are some times in the score, let me see if I can find one real quick, where you have maybe 4 measures to change instruments, which is doable. It's just stressful, and you're already having a pretty stressful time in the pit playing 20-30 songs in a row. So for example, here it starts with the electric and then it switches to acoustic. I mean, here I have at least a solid 30 seconds, so it's not that bad of a change, but there are moments where you only have 4 measures to change instruments. Of course, I'm not finding one now when I actually need to, but they exist, they're there. Sometimes you have less than 4 measures, so you have to kind of like cut out early and then switch instruments, but then you're missing part of the scoring. The less instrument changes, the better. And since the piezo on this thing sounds just as good, if not better, than most acoustic electric guitars on the market that are plugged in and use a piezo system, it just eliminates all that hassle for me. The next thing I'll do is I'll find a YouTube performance of the show and I'll play along with it just to get a feel for the run of the show. Especially since I'm not going to be at any dress rehearsals or the sits probe, I need to be able to get a feel for the show and see what the flow is like, see how fast some of these songs are, because you don't get tempo markings or anything in these books. So I want to make sure that I can play everything the way that I'm supposed to. Now again, it's not going to be a perfect 1-for-1. Even night to night, the performance is going to be different. Actors can drop lines, or props can be in different places, and that might throw off the flow of the show, or there might be more time in between certain scenes, or even vamps within a song, depending on how things are going on stage. So I use this as a good template, and it just allows me to play along with the show and make sure that I have everything prepared for what I need. And the most important part about that is that it allows me to figure out some vocal cues and figure out when I'm supposed to come in for some of these songs. So for example, in the song Not Me, I'm tacit for the first half of the song. So if I want to come in at the right time, I'll find specific parts of the music, like right here for measure 20, there's a vocal line, asked the questions. And then a couple measures later, I have the cue, and who'd have thought that confidence would? So that means, okay, I'm getting ready to play, and confidence would, okay, I'm getting ready. And then I hit my note on the word not, so that when that word comes in, I know that I'm supposed to play not me, like that. And again, it just kind of helps me get ready and come in at the right time, especially since counting all these measures of rests, it's pretty tedious. You're supposed to do that, and of course I do most of the time, but having cues helps you get prepared so that when you show up, you're not playing 20 questions with the musical director who has a million other things going on with the rest of the pit and the production staff. So the more prepared I am coming into the gig, the less I have to bother anyone else about things like that. Another thing I'll do is write down some instrumental cues. So for example, there's a part in this song, Dance of the Robe, where there's a back and forth between a dance break with drums on stage and a full band part with other dance movements going on stage. And it's very syncopated, kind of loose, out of time. So I have little cues here to kind of help guide me as well. So I know that this is a drum break, then there's an ensemble part, back to the drums, back to the full band, and then there's a chant on stage. And then after that specific chant, then I know that I'm supposed to come in with this vocal melody. And again, it's just little things like that that help you stay prepared for the show. And last but not least, the most important tip that I have for preparing for musical theater gigs is to just take a deep breath and just have fun with it and just vibe with it. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to make a handful of mistakes. It's very rare that every line, every dance move, every instrument change, every note, every downbeat, and every cue is hit at the exact same spot throughout the 2+ hour length of this show when you factor in intermission. So you want to just be able to adapt in the moment. You want to be able to keep one eye on the conductor and one eye on your music at all times, just to follow little cues, or if something gets skipped, you can jump from measure 1 to measure 7 at a moment's notice. And you want to just be aware of everything else. So you don't want to be too loud, because you want to be able to take everything else in and make sure that you're at the same point as everyone else. That just about wraps up today's video. I hope that this gave you all a little bit of insight as to how I prepare for musical theater gigs. They're very different from everything else that I do, and they require a different level of attention and detail paid to them. And I thought it would be helpful if you're considering taking on this kind of work, what you can expect and how you can best prepare to make sure that you show up and you feel comfortable, you feel confident, and you feel ready to give it the best performance that you possibly can. If you want more content on the regular, I post all the time on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on the community page here on my own YouTube channel. Until next time, everyone, keep on practicing and keep on following your dreams.